What is the number one key to a successful rental portfolio? It's finding great tenants and keeping great tenants. Today, we have the expert. It's Mark Goodman in the house, so let's get started. So today we are with Mark Goodman, and he's an absolute expert in how do you find the best tenants for your properties. So, Mark, welcome.
It's great to be here, Andrew. Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it, and let's dive right into it.
Yeah,
right?
no, I think you're going to be the next favorite man for a lot of investors. So, Mark, just briefly, before you kind of get into best practices, why it's so important, you want to give just a brief background in terms of your own real estate. How did you get started? How many properties do you have today? And like numbers-wise, how many rentals are you doing? So people kind of have a understanding of why we have you here as the expert.
Okay. So I got involved with real estate a few years ago, and was searching for a good program, and I ended up meeting you after being scammed. And then I developed, over that time, 32 doors. I have a couple small multi-units, but mostly single-family houses.
Okay.
So 32 doors. Going to look to add to that a little bit more. I was just kind of holding off, and
Sure.
a couple things weren't stabilized, but now they're stabilized, so looking to grow again. And along the way, I had an opportunity to help people with rentals.
Got it.
And the first rental I did was in Evergreen Park. That was probably about 7 years ago. And at this point, I've done about 700 leases.
Okay, got it. And so this is not, you don't work for a company. This is this is Mark Goodman, right? I mean, basically, this is your little, and you're not renting out apartments. That's not what you do. This is single family houses is what you specialize in, and 2-unit, 4-unit, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so basically, whatever investors have, I can help them with,
Sure.
or at least instruct them what to do if they want to do it themselves. But oftentimes, brand new landlords or people, they have challenges with it, and it can be quite confusing what to do. Can I do this? How do I do this? So sometimes it's easier just to delegate it, especially if you're busy working a job, or you have a family to raise, or you're scaling. It's just something, it's better to outsource it.
Got it. And geography-wise, because we have obviously listeners from all over the country, geography-wise, what is the geography that you operate in?
So I live on the southwest side of Chicago in Orland Park, and most of what I'm doing is in the south suburbs.
South suburbs.
Not all of it.
Right.
I've done, or will be doing, leases as far north as Evanston.
Right.
Probably close to the Wisconsin line, Rockford, and I've even been as far west as Elgin.
Okay.
And also east into Indiana.
Okay. So basically, general area of operation for everybody listening, for you, right?
It's probably a 75-mile radius.
Yeah, is southwest part of Chicagoland area.
Yes.
And Chicago's just a huge radius-wise, a huge area. So about a 75-mile radius. Ideally, if it's within 10, 15, 20 miles, is much easiar for you.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Got it. Okay. So, and today you have 32 doors, you said?
32.
Okay. Do you know numbers-wise on 32 doors, what kind of revenue are we talking about in terms of cash flow?
The actual dollar amount, I would say, is probably close to about $500 a door.
500 a door.
Yeah.
So you should be somewhere, what the averages in general master are going to be somewhere around 500. So 15 to 16,000, all stabilized is what you do net out. Mm-hmm. Man, you realize, like, it's been, 7 years now, 6 years you've been around us?
It was 2016, June of 2016.
Okay. All right. You've come a long way. You've come a long way, not only just what you've done with real estate, who you are as a person, but this is genuinely from the bottom of my heart. Congratulations. Because, and I say this to the audience a lot of times, you'll see guests come and you see the, kind of before and after. Right, before I was 300 pounds, today I'm, a fit 170 kind of thing, right? And yet that journey can be arduous, long. You can have a lot of pitfalls, right? Like you realized, right? And sometimes the start is not the greatest start out the box, which is kind of, your start was not like, oh my God, Mark is going to kind of end up here. It took some doing, right?
Probably the least likely to succeed would be a better
No,
term.
no. I mean, yeah, I was not going to say that, but yeah,
I can
true.
say that.
No. I mean, and you know why I actually love what Mark has done is, sometimes some people have this innate ability, and that's just how some people have it, right? And Mark did not. Mark was not one of those guys that he's very. One thing about Mark is once he gets something in his head, right, it's done. Right? He doesn't do very complicated things, but once he gets something in his head, he sticks with it. Because at the time, a few people would said, "Hey, there's a huge need for people to be able to rent out properties." A lot of management companies out there. You're not a management company at all, right? You just specialize in getting tenants placed in the properties whenever there's turnover.
Correct.
Right, whether it's a brand new property, I mean that's the only side of it.
Front end part
Front
only.
end part is all you do, right? Because a lot of management companies charge a lot of money, and they play a role, obviously. But a lot of times, people don't want to do that. If they want to efficiently run a rental, that's not something that they want to do. So let's kind of start with the basics, right? Today, as we speak, right? Last month, how many leases did you do?
I did 15.
15 leases, okay? Now, 15 leases, think about the amount of how many properties do you have advertised right now?
As of we speak right now, 40.
40 properties,
Yes.
right? So 40 properties, how does that work, man? I mean, how can you handle the amount of calls that you get in a day, week, month?
So I have a virtual assistant that works 40 hours a week, just like scheduling people.
Okay.
And I can probably take that up to about 60 hours if I want to.
Okay, got it. So you get that many calls every single day.
Yeah.
That you
requests to view properties, calls, text messages, emails.
Right. So you have a full-time assistant just to set up. Yes. Now, today you show the properties a little differently, right, than the normal person may understand. What is the process? Because what we want to get to is you've developed an expertise in being able to select good tenants. And we're going to talk about Section 8 or Housing Choice Voucher Program also, and that's known by different names around the country. Number one, Chicago market, as most of you guys know, it is not the easiest market to work in, right? And you don't do a lot of business in quote-unquote Chicago. Right, but even Cook County, which is the county in which Chicago comes in, it's very restrictive in terms of the rules against landlords. It's not a landlord-friendly area to operate in, right? People have the people that you deal with predominantly are going to be, I'm going to say, C suburbs. Predominantly. Now, obviously, there are some B, some A suburbs, but it's going to be that C suburb, which we call challenging, B meaning a little bit better than C, A meaning an affluent suburb, right? But majority of your people are going to be in a challenging area, not a crazy area, but definitely some challenges, right? So what's the process for you? Like when you start looking for tenants. So let's start from the very first thing, right? And I'm asking the question, I'm trying to learn from you, right? And we'll kind of hear about your process also. So if I am a landlord, according to you, now you're an agent, you can advertise the property in MLS.
Correct.
If you want. Do you put the property in MLS generally?
No.
Okay, why not?
I don't believe that's a really good place to do that because for the most part, tenants, especially if they have housing choice vouchers, aren't looking for properties on the MLS. They don't have access to it.
Okay, got it.
So I use Zillow, Trulia, HotPads.
So Zillow, Trulia, HotPads, no secret in this, right? I mean, this is something that anybody could use. So a lot of people, even in Mastery, that own a lot of properties, right? Why do they choose to go to you? Because obviously, if you're doing the work, you got to get paid, right? But why do they go to you?
I think they go to me. I have a good reputation for helping people at this point. I've proven myself. I've gone out of the way. Bent over backwards in most cases. Being able to effectively get people through the properties in a timely fashion as quick as possible, as many people as possible. Also being able to one of the key things is being able to meet the tenants in person. You know, I would never give just someone keys or approve them without meeting them in person and they're in the lockbox, send your money, you're never going to hear from them again, and they're never going to pay you again.
Right. So 1,000+ properties you've rented out. I mean, close to 1,000, I should say.
700 at this point.
Okay.
But I've done about 70, as of last month, 75.
75. Okay. So with that, you've gained a lot of experience, right? And so did you at one point list the properties in MLS and then you got away from it?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, it just wasn't really effective.
It was not effective. Yeah. Okay. And a lot of times, I mean, I personally, I feel, and tell me if this is right or wrong, do you do any signs in the neighborhood, right? Meaning at the house? You don't?
No.
Okay. So that's not, at least, and is this geographic? Because in Florida, what we find is if we do a sign in the yard, it's very effective. And now around Chicagoland area, you can't do bandit signs, right? For rent, for rent, for rent, for rent, all over the place. In Florida, because some of the counties are not as strict, you can do a bunch of those and you get a lot of tenants. You think that's kind of geography has something to do with it?
That could be a good point in Florida with the geography of that. What I feel here in Chicago is that if you put a sign in the front yard for rent, everybody and their brother is going to call.
Got it.
The people across the street, people driving by, most of them aren't actually going to be qualified.
Got it.
So for me, it's about working effectively with people who are qualified or at least appear to be qualified or said they were through their Zillow profile.
Got it. Okay. So, and then you said Zillow, the other, what were the
Trulia and Hot Pads.
Trulia and Hot Pads. What do you think is the best according to you?
Zillow.
Zillow, by far.
By far.
Okay, got it. You do a free listing or you do a paid listing?
Free listings.
Free listings. Okay. So you don't see a big difference between free versus paid?
No, I don't see it. Not at what I'm doing, because I also, in the last 6 months, have grown a email marketing list of 3,800 people, and I get a lot of referrals.
Get out of here. You have 3,800 tenants, just people basically
looking for rentals. Yeah, a lot of them
kidding.
are friends and family of other people. But I also use that list to, this is a slight deviation here,
Sure.
but I also use that list to market for unwanted property.
Okay, got it. I mean, no, that makes perfect sense because you're looking to buy properties yourself.
Right,
Okay, right. No, that's a wonderful side benefit of what you do in terms of business. So you're putting the property on Zillow. Mm-hmm. Now, when you put the property on Zillow, generally somebody calls. Let's say I'm looking at property, right? Not a woman, because generally it's going to be a woman with with kids that's going to have a voucher. Right? So now a lot of people have a bad connotation when you say Section 8, when you say housing choice program, right? And again, they sanitize the name because Section 8 had gotten a bad rap, right? Let's just be honest. Mm-hmm. So you've dealt with hundreds and hundreds of these tenants, and you've dealt with them for 3, 4, 5 years now.
Yes.
Right? Good or bad?
So just like any tenant, whether they have a voucher or they don't have a voucher, doesn't mean they're good or they're bad.
Okay.
Same thing with market rate people. There's plenty of bad market rate people, right?
Right.
Just because their market rate doesn't make them good.
Okay. So hold on. Let me explain this. You call market rate versus Section 8. So Section 8 or housing choice voucher program, and depending on what city, what state you live in, they may have lots of different programs. Like Chicago has lots of different types of programs. You have CHA, you have a bunch of different programs that are either state or federal type of programs that are run. So they may be called by different names, and different authorities, different cities are going to run them. But basically, it's housing assistance, right? That's the generic base across the board term that the possible tenant is getting some sort of help in terms of their rent. It may be it's
subsidized.
Yeah, it's subsidized, basically. They may get a $100 voucher or they may get the entire rent covered, right? It's going to be driven by their income, right? Amount of dependence and amount of income. That's basically what it really boils down to. Yep. And then market rent, we call it whenever it's a tenant, that's a regular tenant that has nothing to do, is not on some sort of subsidized housing.
Correct. They're working in the workforce, earning money every month and paying their own rent.
Got it.
No subsidy. Okay.
So with Section 8, whenever you're doing that, you're saying that the tenants come in all shapes and sizes. We're talking about in terms of taking care of your property.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So somebody calls, right? Janet calls and she says, hey, I'm trying to inquire about the property, right? Now, today you have a VA that answers it. And do you do live answers or a phone or a
All electronic.
all electronic?
Yeah,
Okay.
all electronic.
Okay.
Yeah, don't really have time for the phone calls.
Okay. So now you've gotten away from the phone calls
Yes.
because it's just not possible.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
And you know what? If I get 100 people that want to talk to me today and I only talk to 10 of them,
Right.
is that fair?
Right.
So it's easier only to talk to people at properties.
Okay, got it. So before that, you do not engage with conversations with them at this point?
No.
Okay. What would you suggest to people that are listening, and maybe this is their first, second, third property, right? How did you do it when you started?
So if I only had 3 or 4 or 1 or 2 properties on
Sure.
Zillow, it'd be a little different.
Okay.
Then I would be more inclined to taking phone calls, screening the people a little bit more. Right now, I'm just trying to get through the mass of people who are coming my way and get them to view properties. Because the only way I'm going to get your property or any other investor property rented is by getting people in the door.
Okay, got
So
it.
it's about, I just need people to come out.
Come on. Okay.
And if we can go into the tour part,
Sure.
that would be the next part. So oftentimes, like last Sunday, I showed 25 properties, all in the south suburbs.
You showed 25 properties in one day.
Yeah, that's common.
That's
Yeah, on the weekend. I usually do this on the weekends because that's when most people are available. The most I ever did in one day was 32.
holy
But,
cow. And now we'll get into the process for this, right? I mean, you've gotten it down to a science, right? I mean, it's just boom, boom, boom. And you're not just showing a property to a person.
Right.
So describe kind of what your process is whenever, so people kind of get an idea in terms of that what's really possible when and why do you do it and what are the advantages of it?
So oftentimes people will tell me, I can see more properties with you in a few hours than I can on my own in 2 months. So that's what I'm offering people.
Got it.
The value to see multiple properties. So, especially when they're all in a targeted area in the south suburbs, I can easily show 25 properties in one day. That's I start at noon and I'm done about 7 p.m.
So you're going from property half an hour kind of thing.
Not even, it's less than that.
Oh, it's less than half an hour.
It's a moving tour, more or less.
Wow.
And-
Okay.
But they're given an email list a couple days in advance of the exact times with all the details of the properties, and all they have to do is show up.
Okay, got it. So in terms of volume wise, I mean, with 40 properties advertised a day, so for you to get 100 pieces of communication or whatever is no big deal.
Yeah.
Right? Every single day. Okay. So, and then you assign, where are you looking? Do you have a voucher, no voucher, all those details the VA takes or not, none of that?
No, at that point, I'm not even concerned about that. I just need
Got it.
people to come out.
Got it. Okay.
Because the more people that come out, the hotter the property looks.
Got it.
Sometimes the easier it is to push the rent for the investor.
Got
if
it.
that's possible.
Okay, got it. So as far as now today, obviously you have a working knowledge, right? And if I gave you a town, you would know approximately for a 3.2, 3.1, 3.1.5, what rents you could push, what time of the year, right? And Chicago is a summer-winter market,
Correct.
right? I mean, just because of the geographic location of Chicago, that what are the best months in terms of finding the best, most qualified tenants and have the most choice?
April through August.
April through August. That's pretty much the rental
Right.
months, right? Because in winter, the properties sit. That's just, I mean, how
It
it
takes
is.
longer. There's less people looking.
Okay. So April through August is the best time.
Correct.
Okay. And as far as with housing voucher tenants or with market rent tenants, with housing voucher, you cannot sign a 2-3 year lease.
They only do a 1 year lease.
They only do a 1 year lease. But what is the tenant turnover for a housing tenant?
Oftentimes they'll say 2, 3, 4 years or
Easily
longer.
or longer,
Yes.
right? Because that process is so arduous and such a pain that they generally prefer not to move.
If they don't have an expanding family, usually there's no reason for them to move.
For no reason for them. Yeah. I mean, because that process is not an easy process, neither on the tenant, and it's equally painful to a certain extent on the landlord.
Correct.
Because you got to do inspections, and it's the government, they're going to work on their own time.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's just how it is.
Yes.
So as far as market tenants, the leases that you're signing with them, are you doing a year lease, 2 year lease, 3 year lease? what is your typical lease?
So always shoot for a 2-year lease.
Always should. So for people who are not around us, right, this is a very strange concept, right? They're like, what do you mean? Don't you want to do raise rents every year, right? Because people are very concerned with, can I raise the rent $10, $20, $50 every year? And they're like, that's how you maximize. No, that's not how you maximize. Why do you look for 2 to 3 year leases?
Because it keeps people in the properties and it's stabilized for the investor.
Right. And then
It's a
also,
win-win.
yeah, it's not only, it's people stay in the properties. Number two, generally a person who's willing to sign a 2-year lease, even a 3-year lease, is going to be a lot more stable tenant.
Correct.
Right? Because if it's somebody who's floozy, oh, well, maybe in 9 months I'm going to be moving, guess what? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Right? You're gone. Right? It doesn't matter what your credit score is, doesn't matter what it is, because tenant turnover is the biggest killer. You can have a great property, you can have a great location, you can have everything great. But if you have a lot of tenant turnover, that's where landlords lose money because it costs money to turn over a tenant every single time.
Yeah,
right.
The vacancies, maybe modifications, painting, whatever has to be done.
Right. So I know. So you get these people. Generally, you're getting 2 families, 4 families. How many people show up on one of your tours?
Well, this time, so let's talk about April through August,
Sure.
and then talk about the rest of the year. So, in general, in the busier time, there's more families.
Okay.
2 years ago, coming out of COVID, I had 30 people at showings like all year long.
All year long.
It was
right?
insane. I would just go out and do, a tour, and I just want to come home and not talk to anyone or see
Right.
anybody and just eat and go to bed. I was
Right.
so exhausted. It's a little bit different now. The rental market it's a lot harder.
Right. It's a little bit softer now.
It's a lot
and it got
softer.
softer in the last year and a half.
Correct.
Right.
It's been getting softer. I haven't seen it stay or rebound yet.
Right.
I'm waiting for that, but I'm hoping that will be maybe next April.
Okay, got it.
Right now, it's not that way, and in my opinion, 8 out of every 10 people have a voucher.
Got it. Okay. So in the markets that you work, 8 out of 10 people have a voucher.
Well, just in what I'm seeing,
Right.
even though mostly I'm in the south suburbs, but
Sure.
I do go a few other places, but it's still vouchers everywhere.
Vouchers everywhere. Okay, got it.
And they're brand new vouchers.
Okay.
People that just got vouchers and that they don't even know how to navigate the system.
Okay. They have no clue how to do it. Okay. So in that case, you'll have 2, 3, 4 people, 10 people possibly. That look at a property, and you're just kind of moving, going from one house to another house to another house. You're just kind of driving, and you have a fixed schedule, and that's it. 12 o'clock, you got to be here. If they're not there, it is what it is. That's the end of story. You're not making a special trip for somebody to go show them one house.
No, I don't like doing that, and it's almost impossible. If I have, let's say I just had 30 properties on Zillow.
Right.
And one person from each property
Right.
needs a private tour because they got there late.
Right.
And
It's
I'm already
impossible.
working 90 hours a week.
Right.
Where's that time even going to come at?
Right. It's
not
impossible to do that. Right. And so you've kind of built that scale today. Now, what would your advice be to people when you were handling 1Z, 2Z properties at one point, right? When you got started, would you suggest that if possible, make time slots available, or would you say show the properties whenever people are available? If people are getting good amount of calls, because obviously it's going to be supply and demand.
Yeah. So if you're getting a lot of calls, I would probably try to group them in.
Okay.
I would still do a group tour.
Okay.
I think that's better for you and your time management. Plus, it also creates interest and makes people bring their A game.
Right. And explain that, because a lot of times people don't understand. It's like, think about this, guys, right? You have a great property hits the market, and you just cannot get a booking time, showing time to see the property, because there's the whole calendar is booked, right? There's person after person after person. You're in the house. There are 2 people standing in the driveway to get in right after you. Guess what it does? Oh my God, the property's hot, right? And people are going to bring their A game. Same exact thing happens with tenants, correct?
Right.
So when you have 5, 10, 15 people look at the same property and they're like, oh my God, I'm interested, and then everybody's going to want to give you their story. Right, because a lot of people are going to have their whole story. Well, let me explain, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure initially you listen to a story or two. What is the process in terms of, because you have to be fair to people, right? You have to treat people equally,
Right.
not only
That's
by the
key.
law,
You
right?
have to- yeah.
But in terms of morally and ethically, right? You have a real estate license, right? So how do you do that process exactly?
So the easiest way is to have everyone there at a certain time.
Right.
Explain everything to them all at one time, so
Right.
they all hear the same information.
Right.
So it's all consistent.
Right.
And no one can say it was deviated.
Got it. And then everybody puts in an application at that point?
No, not everyone does an application.
Okay.
Some people don't. Maybe the property's too small.
Sure.
Maybe the bedrooms are too small. Or,
Okay. You have them fill out an application old school, or is there an electronic application?
It's electronic.
Electronic. Okay. So you basically, once they've toured the property, you send them a
If they're interested.
If they're interested, what app do you use, or what website do you use for that?
So I have a Main Street Organization of Realtors
Sure.
application, and I just email it to them.
Okay.
Because at this point, I don't want, before someone's interested, I don't really want their contact information, and I don't want them contacting me because I
Got it.
can't get anything done because the phone rings all day and you just can't do anything, right?
Got it. Okay.
So at that point, I have to separate the men from the boys, right? I'll go personal with them there at that
Right.
point if they're interested in going.
Got it. Okay. And so they're going to get that application, and then have you used, what is that, TransMove?
TransUnion Smart Move.
TransUnion Smart Move.
So
Okay.
I email them the application. I ask them to email me all their documents
Got it.
back. And then once I get that, need all the email addresses for all the applicants who are 18 and over for TransUnion Smart Move. It does criminal, eviction, and credit history.
Got it.
So send those out same time. They have to complete them. And then from there, an investor can look at it, dissect it, and figure out if this is someone they can rent to or not.
Got it. And as far as in terms of tenants, right, you're going to have a credit, obviously, one of the things. With criminal background, especially in Cook County, right, there are some rules that you can look at this, you cannot look at this, you can take this into consideration, you cannot take this into consideration. In Cook County, source of income. Source of income, which means that if you have a market tenant, let's say hypothetically is going to pay you $2,000, your tenant, which is housing choice tenant, is going to pay you $2,000. Then you have to look at them equally, meaning their source of income. What you cannot say, hey, this person has a voucher, I am not going to rent to them. That's discrimination, right? And this is not just City of Chicago. This is all of Cook County.
Correct.
Right. So that's just kind of an ordinance that doesn't apply to Illinois, but that's an ordinance that was put in place by Cook County. Right. And different parts of the country are going to have those types of things. As a landlord, it would behoove you to check that, to be aware of it. And my suggestion would be is please follow the letter of the law. Right. That's just my suggestion. There's no reason. Do good tenant screening. Be equally tough on everybody. Right? If you're a little whack job, it's okay to be a little wacky. Can't discriminate.
Just be wacky
right?
to all of them.
Wacky to all of them, right? I mean, if you're and by what I'm saying is that if you're really rigorous about screening, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's got to be equal. It's got to be consistent because that's the biggest place HUD and everybody kind of has frowns upon is that, hey, you can't apply one standard to person X and another standard to person Y.
Correct.
That does not work, right? So now, cats, dog, pets, right? Because that's another. I mean, I love dogs personally, but it can be a bloody nuisance. Right? But on the other side, some people say, like if I talk to in-house management for us, all the properties I own, right? They're like, actually, we like people with dogs. What's your stance on it?
So people with dogs tend to stay longer, and I think that's why you like them.
Okay.
'Cause sometimes it's harder for them to move with that animal or that pet.
Right.
So they're more likely going to stay in that property for a longer amount of time.
What's your experience with that? What about cleanliness? What about because if you have a dog or cat, you're going to have pet smell. It's just how it is,
Each
right?
one has its own separate issue.
Right.
Right. In general, most people will disclose that they have pets.
Sure.
There's a fair amount of people that, don't disclose they have pets,
Right.
and then
Right.
you show up a month later at the property to collect your rent or whatever, and I didn't know you had a dog.
Right.
Yeah.
So no, and this is something
It
that
happens.
Yeah, it's something that as soon as if somebody just comes out point blank and says, hey, I have a dog, it's a that Malamute, or it's a pit bull, or it's
bull,
the 6-7 breeds that we all know, right? Now, and people fall on different categories of it, where some people are just straightforward, right? Hey, this is what it is, blah blah. It's a good tempered dog. It's not an issue, right? But you got to be careful whenever somebody says, "Oh, an emotional support animal," right? I mean, it's the biggest nonsense bullshit ever.
I have
right?
an 80-pound pit bull. It's an ESA.
Yeah, it's kind of, again, it's just like understand, but you gotta make sure your insurance provider is covering that. Otherwise, they have to buy a policy that covers that dog.
Correct.
And you have to be named additional insured, right? As a landlord, you need to get and make sure they pay for the year. They pay for the year, and next year and again, guys, listen, at the end of the day, your homeowner's policy, if there is an issue, in most cases, if it goes to court, they're going to cover it. But if you force the tenant to make sure they have proper insurance, what it does is it provides an additional layer of benefit, right? That's the biggest thing, is that it only puts you in a better position, right? So in terms of tenant screening, you do the credit score, right? Now, in an area where you're doing rentals, right? A lot of the credit scores are not going to be the strongest credit scores in the world, right? No. And this is like in Chicago, and it's economics, right? The area you're in is not crazy, but parts of it are not necessarily the highest economic bracket. So for you to see credit scores somewhere around 600, 620, 630 is very common.
It's very common. Average score is about 620.
Average score is 620.
Okay, so I see a lot of scores between 580 and 640.
Okay, 580 and 640.
A lot of times they're rentable. Their debt to income might be a little off.
Okay.
And they might have high utilization.
Got it.
That's a lot of, sometimes very common, high utilization. So that's going to bring their score down, and maybe they have a couple of collections.
Okay.
Probably student loans, maybe medical bills.
Got it. So, and does it make a difference if it's a market tenant that's going to have to pay money out of pocket versus if it's some sort of a housing assistance type of program? Because do I have to really worry about the credit score if it's housing assistance program?
And that's a great question. So, and I often get that question from people with housing choice vouchers.
Right.
I have a voucher, but my credit score is not so good. Are you going to be able to help me? And, the answer is yes, I can probably help them. The credit score isn't probably the determining factor there. What most landlords want is the assuredness that my rent is going to be paid. I'm going to get paid every month.
Okay.
So you have to look at the avenue, where's the money coming from, and the, I guess, persistency of that payment.
Okay. Yeah, it's a recurring payment, obviously, every month.
Right.
So are these people going to be able to make payments consistently or not?
Right. So let's add a twist to it. So now we have that same person, maybe the voucher pays $2,000, but their tenant portion might be $800 because of their income,
right,
but their score is $500.
Right.
And you're like,
Yeah, is that
now there's a question mark there, right?
So the way the voucher works is overall in a few lines is that the first thing they're going to look at is what is the area location. For that particular location, it's going to be A, B, C, D, all the way through Z codes. Right, it's coded by
zip
codes. Yeah, and then they will assign a code to that. It's in X area, it's in B area, it's in A area, that sort of thing. Right? And based on whether it's a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom voucher that the person has, then they're going to look at the amount of actual bedrooms in the house. Right, meaning a person could have a 4-bedroom voucher, but you only have 3 bedrooms in the house.
So you get paid
right?
as the 3
So
bedroom
you're going to
voucher,
get only paid on 3 bedrooms.
Correct.
Now, on the other hand, you have a 5-bedroom house, and the person only has a 2-bedroom voucher. Right? Guess what's going to happen?
It's not gonna
You're
work.
only going to collect. You may have a big house, you may have a nice house, but if the tenant you found and you decided to rent to only has a 2-bedroom voucher, they're going to get maxed out.
Yes.
That's just how it is, right? So you're not going to be able to get extra just because you have a bigger home, you have a nicer home, you did over-the-top rehab, whatever the case may be. Because these are basically, those metrics are not dependent on your house. The house has to pass a standard for housing. Once it passes that, then all the other, how many bedroom voucher does the voucher holder hold, and then how many bedrooms you have. And now, for a housing assisted type of a tenant, if there is a bedroom in the basement, will they consider that or not?
Has to be an egress.
Okay.
And at one point, they wanted a closet. I think they've relaxed on that condition.
Okay.
But they have to have an egress.
Got it. So
In the room.
In the room, egress. So any bedroom that is in a basement. Now, for people listening in Texas or Florida, you guys don't have basements, so you don't have to worry about it, right? But in a place like Ohio, Illinois, Pennsylvania, a lot of these places where it's traditional for us to have basements in a lot of properties, a lot of landlords will choose to finish the basements. Right. But then you need to have an egress window in case of a fire. Egress is called, you can get in and out, not in generally, it's meant for egress. It's basically out, emergency out is what that is. That if that is there, and then you said there was a closet requirement, now they've eased up on it in terms of a closet requirement in the bedroom.
Yeah, and a housing inspector told me that from Section 8 because it had been difficult
to find property.
To find properties like that. So
got it.
They kind of relaxed on that one condition.
Got it.
The other thing that might come into play is the height of the room.
Right.
So CHA, Chicago Housing Authority, in particular, they will want, I think it's 80 inches.
Right.
Floor to ceiling.
Yeah. 80 inches finished.
Yeah.
Meaning below drywall or below whatever the finished surface is.
Yeah. So if I know of one investor that we know who had a house who he was like 79 and maybe a quarter, and they gave him a hard time.
Right. Because, I mean, that's just the requirement. So you have to meet certain minimum standards. Right. Now, you have somebody that's interested, let's just say doesn't have the best credit score in the world, right? But submits everything, gets everything over to you. Whenever you're talking with the landlords, right? Obviously, at the end of the day, it's their property. Right? Unless you're renting to your own one of your own properties. But what should landlords look for? Let's say they don't have the best credit score in the world.
Right. So aside from the credit score on the credit report, I like to look at the utilization.
Okay.
You know, what are the utilization of the credit is how much are they actually using? Sure. Is it very high or is it low? I mean, that's a good determining factor if they're going to have extra money to actually pay rent.
Got it.
If they're maxed out, it becomes more questionable, right?
Got it.
Also, I don't like to see a lot of collections, especially for AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, or utilities, right?
Right.
If they're not paying their utilities or their cell phones, why are they going to pay you?
Right.
They're not.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is that if they have medical bills, that's not as big a deal, correct?
Student loans and medical
Student loans and medical bills, if that's what's dragging their credit score down, right, then it's not as big a deal.
Yeah, and those are very common.
Those are very common, right? But if basically they're just people who are just habitually late on everything all the time, one or two things, you have a $50,000 medical bill, right? That's understandable, right? You have student debt, that's understandable, right? And you're going to have to understand. Let's just put it that way, right? Whether for me or you it's not understandable or not, that's a different case. But in this case,
if you want to rent your house, you're going to have to understand it.
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how it is. I know I've heard you talk about visits to the property. Do you do that for the tenants? Maybe when you're screening for your own tenants in your own properties, do you do property visits?
So outside of showings?
Yeah, property visits as in to make sure that this is the tenant that you want in the property.
Yeah. I would say that's a really good policy to do at least quarterly.
Okay.
Some people, after you do it a few times, you can kind of see how the tenant's taking care of it, and some are more responsible than others. Some need to be reminded. oh yeah, you need to change that furnace filter.
Right.
That's a common thing. But in general, it's very good for your business to visit your properties and make sure that things are doing that. And if you can't, then hire someone
To do it.
who will do that.
And just build that into the lease.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is that, because I've done so many rentals and I'm working in the same areas, there's a lot of times I have a rental right now on a block where you have a rental.
Right.
I'm driving by your house.
Right.
Whether you know it or not.
Right.
So if I saw something, I might snap a picture, take a
Sure.
quick video and send it to you.
Right.
Hey, your grass, tell your tenant to cut
Sure.
their grass. They're
Right.
going to get a ticket, Monday.
Right.
Just things like that.
Got it. So as far as in-tenant screening, do you do any property visits to screen the tenant?
Oh, so before someone gets approved, yes.
Correct.
I highly, highly, highly recommend it to go see how they live.
Because that's a kind of, even for me, sounds a little uncomfortable, right? Now, mind you, I haven't done a rental personally in a very long time. First 28 properties I had, all of those I rented, right? All of those. And I always used to have the same thing, which is I would show the property at the time, and then at the time you were hand filling out applications, right? Gone are those days today, obviously, but you were hand filling out applications, and I would never take an app to the unit, right, or to the house. I would always make an excuse to go outside if they showed up after I did, and I would look at how their car looked.
Yeah.
Meaning not the age of the car. If the whole car is full of McDonald's and Wendy's and Taco Bell or whatever,
The smoke just come out when they open the door.
Yeah, the bunch of trash, right? Then guess what? Right, wrappers, and it worked, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, they disrespect. Now, their normal stuff is no big deal, right? I mean, we're not, but most of us, even I'm not the most organized person, but I'm not, you'll never find a whole bunch of junk in the car. You may have a book bag, those kind of things, right? That was number one marker. Number two was how they and their kids behaved.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, that's
if
huge.
they let their kids run around the property like a maniac. Now, 4-year-old child, 5-year-old child playing around is fine, right?
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about,
Right.
right? But being disrespectful, right? If you were 5 minutes late or if they showed up late, if they say, hey, I'm so sorry I was late, just the normal things that anybody would expect, right? If you're late, if you're caught up, you'd at least make a gesture to say, hey, man, I apologize, those types of things. And then they're like, well, how do I fill out an application? I'm like, you have to go to the office, pick up the app, and fill it out. The moment they said to me, so you don't have an application, give me attitude, that's it, they're gone.
Yeah.
I don't even want to talk to them.
Good riddance.
Good riddance. Because if they have, you want to rent from me, and you're going to show me an attitude if the office is 5 minutes away, right? Guess what? Do I really want you in my life as a tenant? Absolutely not. And it worked. I mean, that screening, I'm not saying you should do this. At the time, I never even used to run credit, right? I would just put them through the same hoop, every single person, and all the tenants that ended up, and some of them were Section 8, some of them not Section 8, but everybody who ran through that gamut, they tended to be, in general, nice human beings.
Right.
Never had one problem with those people. When you get at scale, you can't do that, obviously, right? That's not a good way of handling that, but it's a lot of times, and even people who got in trouble sometimes, right? Meaning couldn't make rent, whatever. Generally, they made every effort, and generally, they're not the type of people who are bums.
No,
right?
they're still communicating with you and letting you know where it is, and that's huge.
Right.
As opposed to just not answering your calls or anything like that.
I mean, and so you're looking for those factors as you're kind of going through this whole process.
So and this is why I want to meet people in person at the properties, because I'm kind of taking all this in. Yes, I'm watching their kids.
Sure.
Are they well behaved?
Right.
I don't really have time to do in-home visits.
Okay.
So what I encourage the landlords, if possible, I ask them to do it, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to be living with this family, right?
Yeah.
Getting in a relationship. So it's proven to be pretty effective.
Got it.
And it also gives them a chance to have create a one-on-one bond with them.
Sure.
Because whether they think it's the owner or the property manager is irrelevant, but this is who you're going to be dealing with. They're in charge of the property, so they're going to come out to your house and meet you.
Got it.
And I set that up, and they don't have contacted the owner.
Got it. Okay. So you do it for the owner, and that's that.
Three-way call.
Three-way call.
Lots of three-way calls.
Okay, got it. Now, as far as with the housing voucher tenants, right? Because they have a bunch of paperwork to fill out, all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
When the homeowner's doing it, they have to do that process. If they're dealing with you, do they do that or do you do that for them?
I do that.
Okay, so they don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. I mean, in some cases, to expedite it, I've had a few property owners go meet the people. Actually happened about 2 weeks ago. I was driving, and I told them how to fill it out over the phone.
Okay.
Because I've filled out hundreds of them.
Got it.
But I usually do that. I usually meet the people at the housing authority if possible.
You meet them at the housing authority.
It's got to be turned into the housing authority
Got
anyway,
it,
so
got
just have them come to the housing authority.
Got it. Smart. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes the process much more efficient. I didn't lose the packet. It didn't, right? And I imagine now, obviously, with this many properties you've handled, I imagine you've built good relationships even on that side.
Yes.
Because, with the housing authority. Because
Yes.
at the end of the day, you need them.
Correct.
Right? And so it behooves you to have those good relationships so that it moves the ship forward a lot quicker.
I get a few calls every so often from housing authority specialists or
Right.
move specialists, whatever. Hey, I have a tenant that can you help them?
Right.
So they've given me referrals.
Got it. Okay. And
I'm
this
I'm
is
not
just
saying they all got placed,
sure.
but
Right. No, but I mean, this is just smart for you on a business end of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else I missed that are kind of to-dos or not to-dos when it comes to dealing with tenants and long-term success as a landlord?
The biggest thing is be consistent in your approach with whatever you're doing.
Right.
So treat them all the same. Whether they all have to jump through 10 hoops or not,
Right.
The more hoops, the better. But
Right.
Be consistent. Don't allow them to run the show because if they're going to cause problems now, they're going to be problematic later. Meet them in person. Do that home visit. Verify their employment.
What about, I'm sure you've heard this, well, right now I have to, you're like, well, when would you like to move in? Well, yesterday.
I get that a lot because it's so hard. Yes.
Yeah, but they're like, well, right now, I'm living in a hotel. Or I'm living in a motel. You've heard that one before,
yeah,
right?
That's quite common. Yeah. Well, why are you in a hotel?
Exactly.
So
right.
I started asking questions. And,
Yeah.
And I always tell people documentation beats conversation. 10 out of 10 times. So
Right. Because, whenever somebody is that desperate or that down and out, I'm just telling you this, if you really like to do charity and you have a heart, write them just a check for $1,000. That's if that's who you are, I'm just telling you this, that just give them some money and get rid of them if you really want to help. Do not help with giving them your property. It will lead to a disaster.
Yeah.
Every single time. Yeah. Every single time I break my own rules, guess what happens?
Yeah. So why would you say that? Well, the answer is when you get evicted or kicked out of a property, there's nowhere else to go except the hotel.
Right.
In most cases.
Yeah. So it's just and that's the reason why. Obviously, you have an insurance call where somebody's house burned down. That's a different issue.
Okay, so that's
right?
a whole other thing because there's a whole group of people who actually reach out to you and streamline that process.
Right.
That I would take all
day long and every day till Sunday, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's a different. Do you get a lot of those calls also?
Yeah, a couple a month.
Couple a month. Okay. And have you had success with those?
Yes.
Okay, got it. But you don't do short-term or mid-term rentals?
No.
That's not your cup of tea?
No.
Okay, got it. Anything else I may have missed, Mark?
Just the rental process right now it's difficult. I'm hoping, as we said before, that it rebounds maybe by next spring. But, I always recommend to people you should do your own rental, at least one, do it yourself so you can just see how agonizing it is, when you got to confirm the 3 o'clock appointment and they don't show.
Right.
Because you have to deal with that. But in general, it is really the key to having a good portfolio, keeping the turnover at the bare minimum possible, working with good tenants, and doing everything you can to keep them because at the end of the day, they're the ones that make you wealthy.
Right. What is the average for your rentals? Like how long people stay on an average, do you know?
So in my properties, I have my first, I would say 5 out of my first 10, the first tenant's still on the property.
is still in the property.
Still in
and
the
that's been what, about 6 years, 7 years?
Yeah.
6-7 years, right?
Right.
And so you don't have a lot of tenant turnover.
I got the first one in 2018, so it's going on 6 years right now.
Right. And so you're because what we see for us, the average tenant turnover is between 5.2 years and 6.3 years, right? So generally, overall, we don't have a lot of turnover at all, right? Because we're pretty tight in terms of picking tenants, right?
Yeah, that helps the process.
Yeah.
And most people, especially if they have kids and they need the school district, they don't want to move anyways.
They don't want to move anyways. Okay, got it. Guys, having said that, this has been awesome because this is, if you don't understand how to do tenant selection, right, you can do every single thing else well, which is buy great property, good location, do all sorts of things. But guess what? You're going to fail because the one thing in real estate is all about what is the rate of collection. What separates a good property from not so good property is not, who your tenant is, but are they collectible, right? Yesterday, I had a conversation with somebody, and they're like, man, of all our properties right now, we only have 73% collectability. Ooh. Can you imagine? So what that means is for every 10 property you have, only 7 are collectible. So if you have 100 properties, that means 30 of them are vacant, right? Guess what that tells me? Number one, you have a poor location. Number two, you have clearly, because of the poor location, you are going to have a poor tenant quality, right? And that's not the place where you want to be. It's not about how many, it's about what is the quality of the person you have in your given property. So Mark, this has been awesome. You're listening to Andrew Holmes on Cashflow for Life. Please like, please share, and please help us grow. Talk to you soon.